And we are rolling. All right. So I have a longtime acquaintance, Cal Dietz, on the line. I originally heard of Cal. I had never heard of Cal. I went to this seminar down in Virginia, the CVASP Sports Performance Seminar, run by Jay DeMeo every single year, and he fucking crushes it. He always has a group of guests, and Cal was speaking with Val Nasedkin, I think Natalia Vergashansky.
Yeah.
Who else was there? Mike Robertson.
Yeah, I don't know. What was Seleniov that year? You know what I mean?
Jeez, I don't know. But
yeah, I mean, there's always a host of people.
Yeah, and Cal had he kind of really not blew me away, but really surprised me with a lot of the ways that he was implementing different muscle contractions. He was utilizing the eccentric in a specific way. He was utilizing the isometric in a periodized way that really no one had, I don't want to say no one had done, but it was organized in a very structured manner that was very logical to me. And I said, fuck, let me buy this guy's book. I took an Adderall. I read the whole fucking book in a day. And then I read it again, and I called Cal immediately. I tried to get in touch with him, and he stayed on the phone with me for I don't know, hour, 2 hours, multiple times. And we just started BSing back and forth. And, you know, every now and then I'll send him some kind of weird text asking him about some shit that he's doing. And he always responds back. And I don't know, 8 years later, here we are.
Yeah.
So
good shit.
so now what I know, every single year you have some batshit crazy shit going on with your programming that completely wows me. Every single year you figure out more and more and more new weird ways to do shit, and you have logical explanations for a lot of the stuff that you do. And I'm always sitting here like, man, this guy's just he's like a fucking mad scientist. I don't know how you come up with half the shit you do. Where's your brainchild for half this shit? I pissed him off. He ran away.
No. I don't want to forget anything. I'm writing shit down.
So first and foremost, how do you come up with this shit?
Yeah. You know what, man? Like, so here's my formula if you really want to like understand. So basically I question everything that I do. Okay. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's the most known facts in the field. I question it. Like, is this really right? And then that, by questioning everything I do, it creates problems I didn't even know I had. And then all I do is make solutions for those problems. Really, you know what I mean? And so, and I don't care whether it's me. That's a hard part. Like, people don't want to question what they've done, but I mean, I'll get into periodization a little bit. Like, Mike, I've known it's been wrong for 2 decades, but I couldn't figure out a better way to do it. But I think I did 2 years ago, and I've kind of released it to some level for people. And we can talk about that, the periodization part. But man, people don't like to be questioned, right? So when they say that, like, I don't know why they don't like to be questioned, because if somebody walks in my weight room that's an expert, and I have a lot of people visit, man, like one year I had 4 coaches from outside the country who I consider experts. And you're just sitting there going, the things they say, and I'm like, holy shit, this may question everything I know, and everything I know might be wrong. If you're not willing to accept that, I mean, that's the big thing, right? Because our field is so diverse. It involves so many disciplines in the strength performance field, from recovery to vitamins to chemical reactions to electricity to the biochemical aspect, right? I mean, and you think you got it all figured out? Like, you know, and then it goes into my education. Someone asked me the other day, man, I went through from force plates to EMGs. I'm staring at a plasma generator right now. Okay. Like, this is no shit. Right here. There's a tube that's a plasma generator. I'm not shitting you. Like, this is Ghostbusters shit, right? I have probably, with the university and my own education, I mean, it's well over, I'd say, $250,000 with the equipment that I have. $750,000. I mean, right now I got the 1080 synchros in my gym. They're 50,000 a piece. I can analyze the whole strength curve off different exercises. Like, and I think I got a formula figured out for like whether a guy's recruiting type 1 fast twitch fibers or type 2. I think I got a sprint formula for that. But like, I mean, I'd never stop questioning. I have so many projects, and that's the hard part, right? So, and even if I prove myself wrong in some instances, I'll accept it and move on. So, but yeah, man, so 750,000. I probably spent 1 year, $5,000 on Skype calls calling world experts all around, not even in our field, to try to figure out what the hell goes on with different things. You know what I mean?
Impressive, man. And what's been, so you said before we started the recording, you said that this Corona time you've been racking your brains, reading around different things. What's going on in the noggin right now?
Honestly, it's a bunch of compensation patterns that and so for example, like the individualization of, let's say, exercises. So for example, the glute ham hyper, right? So you're laying flat, you got the device, obviously you bend at your knees and you come up. But so I put together some strength zones, basically 13 zones. And I initially put your foot position. So if you're working like strength, max strength, and you're doing glute ham hyper, I felt that you should have your feet in a wider stance when you do glute ham hyper. And then when you get to, let's say, the power phases of my zones, and it just depends on loading and sequencing, which would be zones 9 through 5. I'm sorry. So there's 13 possible zones. 9 through 13 are strength. And we're talking 9 is like just normal strength loading between 80 and 92%. 13 is super maximal loading, 120% load, right? And then you have power, which is the middle phases. And you then go from a wide stance to a more narrow stance. And then when you work speed, I'm talking low loads, more plyometric, you would bring it so that your leg's a little bit inside. And then the question became for me was like, do you turn your toes in? Do you turn your toes out? Well, what I did was then I laid the athlete down and I tested their abductors. And if they were weak in the speed phase, when they did glute hams, they turned their toes in. If they weren't, they turned their toes out, because I'm just trying to find their weaknesses to individualize each exercise. And this doesn't take actually that long. Like I ripped through my hockey team the other day. And then that brought me to the next scenario, is that the glute med involved in hip stabilization is actually probably more important. And actually, once I fixed that problem I just spoke of, once they test strong with an internal rotation, then what I do is I have them take their leg, I have them hold it out to the side while they're laying on their back, and then I hold their foot position out, neutral, or in. And I'll test that glute med. So I pull that leg into the midline of the body while they're laying on their back and their legs just 4 or 5 inches off the ground. And I'm trying to pull it into the middle while they're holding it on the outside. And that actual, whatever test weakest, so let's say I actually rotate the foot. So then the medial fibers of the glute med aren't working as well as they should. So when you do that glute ham, I don't care what phase you're in, that glute med has to stabilize. And I'll get more into that. That glute med has to stabilize. So I actually make your foot positions to the glute ham specific to the muscles that we're testing and your weaknesses.
How are you quantifying the strength in the glute med, and how are you objectively measuring them?
I just muscle test myself just to see where we're at. Because usually one is way much more, and sometimes it's not, but many times, like I'll internally rotate the leg and the fibers will be in, it'll just kick in, it'll be super strong, and then I externally rotate it and they're super weak and I can just move it right into the midline without them giving me any resistance. Does that make sense?
So you're talking side lying, they are abducting, and
Yeah.
all you're doing is depressing the leg. You're pushing the leg down, and whether
the midline of the body, yeah.
so they're either internally rotating, neutral,
Yep.
or externally rotating.
And you can find out which one's the weakest position, and that's the one you hold. So then when you do the glute ham, I'll actually even still put them on their toes. Okay. Now, actually, when I coach the glute ham, for example, I'll actually have them start when they're laying flat, and when their weight's on the outside of their feet, and then they roll to the toes, which then causes a glute to fire, and then they curl at the knee, but they're still externally or internally rotated, even though they're rolling through the foot in any position, because that's the force and the way you should naturally go through the foot. Does that make sense?
Yeah, isn't that how Yesus used to coach the glute ham raise?
I'm not sure if he had you roll through the foot or not. I don't remember.
Okay.
He's been an influence on me for sure. There's no doubt about it. He's, and you read the Soviet Sports Review, and I don't know how many people stole his stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well, and it's like, people will talk to me about my sports back squat, where I don't back squat deep pretty much basically anymore with my athletes, because I've been looking at it for 15 years and haven't found anybody in a back squat position in sports. So I go with a more narrow stance, and my knees go in front of my toes. And I mean, I don't know if people know this, but about 10 years ago, I switched over to squatting, lunging, everything step up was basically a floating heel. And now people are starting to do it a lot. And I think I helped popularize it. But when we do I got a safety bar, single leg split squat. I have athletes that have done 800 pounds with a single leg split squat with a floating heel. And until that foot, which then ties into the glute med we were just talking about. So if that foot's not strong enough and it can't absorb the force when it impacts the ground, when you're running, for say, or acceleration, your body will try to find stability, and it goes to the knee and it says, I can't find it at the knee, and it locks down the hip. So I'm not kidding you. Like, people say, oh, short strides, but during acceleration, when you're short striding, I haven't found to be the hip flexors or hamstring tightness is a limiting factor. I have found that it's the foot can't absorb the force, so the brain shortens the stride, because the brain doesn't want you in the big full stride position and applying a lot of force, because it can't stabilize. Mm-hmm. So everybody thinks about weaknesses. Now, the weakness might be the problem, but the cause is the brain saying you are not able to stabilize this, or you will injure yourself. And that's what inhibits your stride length.
Yeah. Yeah. I've found something similar with my guys. Now you have no problem going super maximal. I am the complete fucking opposite. I go as sub-maximal as possible. I couldn't give two fucks about how strong these guys are. However, I will tempo the fuck out of them. We will do hill tempos. We will do hill sprints. We'll do sub-maximal work. And until they actually get used to the specific forces associated with the skill that we're trying to enhance, stride length will stay short. It will flat out. So until they're used to actually sprinting or strong enough to handle the forces associated with sprinting, whether it be at the hip, at the knee, or at the foot, and I actually happen to think it is the lower aspect of the lower limb. We do all types of submaximal plyometric jumps, and I shouldn't even say plyometric jumps, all submaximal jumps, where it's just jump, land, stick, and we're practicing the amortization. We're literally practicing just landing. And by doing that, practicing the absorption, you're strengthening the lower shank in a similar fashion, I shouldn't say in a similar fashion, similar concept, completely different mode.
Yeah. And I did the same thing for a number of years. And then once Chris Corfus found those spring ankle exercises, there's 5 positions. I can send you a link. And because I have people that say, hey, I've worked the feet for years, done this and that. And then their athlete, I say, well, just check this. And they can't hold this position for 5 seconds.
Yeah.
I'm like, maybe we're not training the foot like we should be. Even plyometrics. My kids were trained in plyos and everything when I started to implement them. And here's the thing, if that foot can't stabilize, and I go max effort, like I have a 132-pound girl that can withstand 250 pounds of me pushing down on her as hard as I possibly can in a super weakened position with her foot, right? And what I've found is if their feet are bad, their running form's bad.
100%.
But the second I can eventually get their feet dialed in and all these compensation patterns go on, running is a hardwired series of reflex. It's just a reflex. The forward reflex is a stumble reflex. That's all it is. Mm-hmm. We are hardwired. So here's, and I don't have to coach kids for running fast because, so here's what I'll do. I will watch them run the entire summer and never coach them. And when I know I'm doing things right is that their running form improves by each different new thing I implement. So that's hard to do, right? Because you naturally want to coach everything. But let's say you have a bad right arch that's not strong. It will go up to, you'll try to lock down your hip, which will then cross over to the left arm. And you will try to counterbalance that instability by swinging your arm out. That's just a series of sequences that I've seen. Once I strengthen the foot, then I don't have to coach you to hold your right arm in when you run, or your left arm, I should say. Does that make sense? Because
100%.
I mean, people, I hear coaches trying to coach shit all the time. I'm like, yeah, but that you can coach that, but they have to hold that. Why don't you fix the problem?
Yeah.
You see what I mean? And we overcoach so much. And even like, I just talked to a coach out of Europe yesterday about, he was like, well, this and that. And he's like, this guy doesn't want to get full range of motion, but he's really fast. And I'm like, well, my athletes that don't do that, when we're doing max speed, max effort, like in regards to lighter loads, like they don't get to max effort. Why? Because they've already shut their muscles off to turn the muscles on to reverse it. And over the years, I've seen my best athletes never want to get to full range of motion when they're repping shit out extremely fast. You know what I mean? But yet, if you want to coach them into that, I think you're wasting potential and work capacity and continuous reps that could just be happening. So, and some people say, well, it's not full range of motion. I said, if they're doing let's say a single leg pitch shark, and in 5 seconds, they can go 5 reps at the bottom position and nail out 11 to 12 for 5 seconds, nail out 12 reps, or go full range of motion and get 4. I'm like, which one in the bottom position do you think is more optimal? Like, well, what about full range of motion? I'm like, these kids have skated 10 million strides through full range of motion. Like, what do you think that top range is going to do any? Like, it's not going to, you're not hurting them. I'm trying to take the weakest position, which is the bottom, and try to make it as strong as possible. The top will work itself out. If you can get the bottom started, the top will work itself out. And just because it's in the weight room doesn't mean like we got it all figured out, right? Because it has nothing to do with what sports happen, the way sports happen. So.
And Cal, this is super interesting because I mean, in terms of you train predominantly a lot of hockey players, is that correct?
Yeah, I do now, and but over the years, I worked with 12 different sports at the university, and then I just kept dropping them. So I mean, I worked from world champs, from track and field, Olympic champs, swimming, various groups. So I got all different aspects. I coached 200 seasons of sports in my lifetime.
So, but then going back into the hockey players, because you got such good experience with them. I mean, I see a lot of the guys have sort of real chocolate-based ankles, because they're in them skates and they're tied up super tight all of the time. How much are you sort of focusing on the feet for these guys, and what are you seeing in terms of their skating now that the skates seem to get a bit softer? They seem to open it up a bit more. Are you seeing it in terms of that too, not just in the running?
I haven't seen much improvement with how they are when they come out of the season. The only thing I saw improve at least was the spring ankle positions that, and we put this in our speed manual for coaches. And these 5 positions teach the ankle to hold stability at very intense loads, right? I mean, they're so hard. And I guess the biggest thing that I saw is when I implemented them, my coaches were like, have you started doing something different? I'm like, why? He's like, because our bad skaters are skating lower. And I realized at that point, if your foot can't stabilize, it will instantly raise your hips because your brain goes, I can't stay in that position and be safe.
Yeah.
And it was the feet that minimized like the ability to skate in a low position. It's the foot will minimize when it's unstable. And I'm talking, think about this. I mean, when a sprinter hits the ground, I mean, there's got to be 700, 800, 900,000 pounds of force in sometimes, right, on that foot. And if it can't stabilize, your body down regulates the nervous system so it doesn't produce as much power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if that's your weak link, and I've seen kids make monstrous gains by just strengthening their foot in 2 weeks, from speed to power output. I mean, again, I have 1080s. I have 4 1080 sprints that can measure all this, right? I have some of the best force plates. I've seen what it can change, and it's like, and what's the only thing that touches the ground when we run? It's the foot, right? Like, we have to get that right. Like, it's minimum. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, linemen that can't stay on their blocks because they say they have bad hips. You check them every time, their foot is weak. It's crazy. Even though, you know, and I don't mind flat feet as long as the feet are strong.
Now, how are you quantifying foot strength? What measurements are you utilizing?
Well, I have really, it was the navicular arch drop test. I mean, it's used in therapy. So basically, and I actually made it a little more intense. So what I'll do is I'll put my athletes on the ground, and it's in my speed manual. I put them on the ground, and then I put them on a bench, and I have them get on one leg, and they squat up. And if that arch drops like more than 3 millimeters, you got a problem. Okay. And then what I did was, so they're bouncing on that one foot, and then they gotta squat forward and put that knee like 4 inches in front of their front toe. And if that arch drops again, you got another problem, because whenever they do anything with their knee in front of the toe, which is basically all sports, that arch will collapse. And then what I do is I have them like get up on their toes, that single leg. And if they can't get past 35 degrees on their toe, they don't have enough strength to hold those positions. And I can send everybody listening. I don't know if you want to put in the show notes the links to the spring ankle exercises that we do.
Yeah, sure.
Do I stress that much? I'm gonna be honest with you, no, because I just make them strong and then we're good. So, you know, and people can find a navicular arch drop test. I just made it more aggressive a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
So then sorry, but I didn't mean to interrupt you then. So outside of those 5 spring exercises that you're doing, and also some floating heel work when you're doing sort of single leg or double leg work, what about, I mean, a lot of people say, you know, just training as much as you can barefoot, or being barefoot as much as you can, that fixes a lot of stuff. Are you giving the yes to that, or do you think you need to do much 100%. More specific interventions?
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, these spring ankles are the ones that I like. And look, people talk about, oh, well, you know, we do the towel with the toe grab. You know, they grab. I'm like, how is that same as the impact of running? Right? I have a 250-pound shot putter who can run. One time I had one that was 265, ran a 4.4, 40-yard dash. Do you think when his foot hits the ground, like there's over 1,000 pounds of force? Like, how is that toe, that grabbing the towel with your toe, going to mimic that? And I think, you know, so many people have gravitated towards rehab, and what they forget about rehab is there's not enough stress. There's just not enough stress. And then the opinion, I'm going to go on a quick rant with PTs here. Like, I'll give you this example. I have a device that can measure abs. It's the 1080 Quantum, where, I mean, I just hooked the device on and I put the kids in flexion. I had a girl produce 700 Newtons. For the average person on this show, and we're talking doing basically a sit-up, right? The average male might go 450, okay? So she did 700. She had a little surgery. They sent her to the PT just to, I mean, it's kind of one of our protocols, sent her to an outside PT. And every person that ever came back supposedly had a weak core, right? You know what I mean? And not only do I have that, right? She produces 700 almost Newtons of force doing ab flexion. So the PT's like, yeah, I got a weak ab. And I'm like, all right, I'll talk to her about it. I'm like, okay. And then what'd you test to say, you know, she had a weak core? Well, she just does. I'm like, you didn't. It's just the way I walked down this path for 10 minutes. I said, look, here's the numbers. The average male is 450. She's 175 pounds. Her DEXA scan says she has more torso musculature than most males that weigh 200 pounds. and she can pull 700 Newtons. And you're telling me she has a weak core? And I was like, sorry to tell you this, but at this point, professionally, each word out of your mouth is more worthless than the one before it, Jimmy. And I'm like, you just mindlessly say stuff because you think everyone's got a weak core. I mean, I got multiple tests from DEXA scans to abduction tests. And I mean, this girl could RDL like 275 like it's her job, right? So I'm like, and then laterally, she's a hockey player. Like, it's just so bizarre to me. And no one tests anything. They just assume. Assumption is the mother of all screw-ups, right? Frustrating.
So to bring it back again to the foot exercises. Now, when you're doing these, it's funny. One of my interns actually just showed me the ankle exercises that you have them do. You're standing off the ledge. You're balancing like this. You're balancing like that. You bend the knee both ways. It's like a straight leg. It's a bent knee, and it's a real bent knee, right?
Simple, yeah.
Yeah, and you're doing an isometric body weight. For some people, starts off as maximal, but then it ends up being submaximal. How long? Now you work up to what, a minute hold in each position?
Well, for that one, for the first phase, we try to go to a minute, and then the second level, we say we just hold a dumbbell and go 30 seconds, right? Whatever you want. And then the last one is you're in those deep positions, and I'm literally a coach, or your partner is pushing straight down and trying to break your ankle in those positions. So with my body weight at 250, in this, let's say a small hockey girl that's 130 has like 500 pounds of force in these extreme positions and holding it. And by the end of the, and really sometimes I get them there within 2 or 3 weeks because, I mean, I'm big in pushing the limits on how fast we progress. Like, here's another thing. I had a coach I showed this to, and then he called me a year later. Hey, I finally got him to like the 10 seconds. I'm like, well, that took forever. I'm like, well, what athlete was this? And he's like, well, I'm coaching an elite high jumper. And I went, what? Like, this guy's ankles and feet should be super strong. And it took him like a year to progress to that point. I'm like, you've like wasted his time. You know what I mean? And it's like, I don't know why we think the body's so frail. Because if you look at what's going on in practice, these kids absorb hundreds and thousands of pounds of force at times. Why can't they do it in the weight room under a very controlled setting? You know what I'm saying? That's the crazy thing. And I just think, and it goes back to rehab, where we get some stuff from rehab and there's just not enough stress, And once I talk rehab people that are good through this and PTs, they're like, yeah, you're right. You're right. You know what I mean? Because they'll be like, yeah, I do these exercises. I'm like, and then I find something. I'm so, all right, if you do these foot exercises, then how strong is your foot? I put them in those spring ankles, and guess what? They can hold it for 1 second.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then, some advancements that we haven't put out there is, instead of pushing just straight down, I'll try to torque the hips, because if you start to look at all these slings running through the body, torque is, it's basically the sling becomes some level of torque, even if you're running straight ahead. So once we get them straight for a few weeks, couple weeks, and we're max effort, then we'll push down and try to spin the hips, because the torque that runs through that leg is now being implemented like it's actually when it's running. You know what I mean? Because even though we're running straight ahead, there's a level of torque between the upper and lower body and all the way down to the ground, right? And I don't know if we train that enough, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah. I've done these positions, and I've actually held each position with no weight for a minute. Now I'm also, and that was on day one of me doing it.
Yeah.
To put it into perspective, I've been barefoot.
You train your feet though, right?
Oh, I've been barefoot for 5 years.
Right.
Yeah, so
as we should be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like even as I do the podcast, you know what I mean? Like we're in my gym right now. I'm the weird guy with the shoes off 24/7. So
weird, bro. You're just weird. You're not just the weird guy.
So
sorry to let you in on the secret.
So I mean, even the basic movements of walking around barefoot all day, every day sort of thing is enough. But we forget that sneakers are ergogenic aids, right? I think that's the biggest thing. Footwear is an ergogenic aid. It's something to help improve performance, but you don't need to perform all the fucking time. So why are you wearing it all the time? It's like someone that walks around with a weight belt 24/7. It makes no sense.
It makes no sense. That's a great analogy, the weight belt thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Seriously. And the thing that, like, look, the one big thing too, when I talk a lot about glute patterns and how your glute needs to fire, but which is another whole fucking nightmare, right? But when that big toe doesn't dig into the ground to grab the ground to pull you forward, your glute doesn't always work correctly. So let me give you this. I have an athlete leave me, and he went on a 2-week vacation, went to the Bahamas or whatever, wore flip-flops the whole time. Came back and his glute didn't work the way it was supposed to. Why? Because when you walk in flip-flops, you have to take that big toe. Instead of grabbing it in the ground, you have to lift it up to hold the damn flip-flops on.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? And his glutes were off. And I'm just like, dude, you had a glute pattern for the whole year that was solid. Stop wearing the flip-flops. The only sandals that are good are the ones that have the strap around the back of the heel, so then you don't have to do that. You know? So it's frustrating. But that whole, well, and then, you know, let's talk about the glutes. I mean, everyone does these glute exercises, and I don't care which ones you do. No one's ever, I've never seen anybody check it. When I check the strength, I have machines, I have devices, I have force plates, I have 1080s Quantrums. I'll test my interns when they walk in, and then we check their glute strength. They do all the glute activation exercises they want. And when I recheck them, guess what? The glutes are always weaker. So if you have a bad glute pattern and it's not correct, the firing sequence, and you do glute activation exercises, you're ingraining the wrong bad pattern. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. So the big thing is I use RPR to fix that pattern, and I teach my athletes to walk. So every time they walk, they have to squeeze that big toe into the ground, which then fires the glute. It's the Babinski reflex, right? When you're born, they rub the bottom of the baby's foot so the big toe squeezes, but that's actually checking the glute extension pattern too. So it's all tied together from your feet up to the glutes. And guys, look, in the last decade, I've been watching. My best athletes have super ass strong feet and large glutes, right? And I'm telling you, when their glutes are fired, and I'm talking powerful son of a bitches, and from men to women, they don't have to have big feet, but every time they got big glutes, guess what? You test that big toe strength, and it's like I put my thumb on that, and when they squeeze it, it's like it breaks my thumb. You know what I mean? It's like it's going to dislocate my thumb. That's how strong they are. Mm-hmm. And they naturally have it. So my point is that, like listeners at home, just check it. I want you to do an RDL with your toes pointed to the ceiling. Do 2. And then on the third one, I want you to grip that big toe. When you go to the ground, at the bottom, grip that big toe in the ground and then do the extension pattern, and the glute turns on. And everything gets lighter. And the sequence is correct. That big toe will drive the right pattern and the glute to fire first. So my point is to all these, like, again, rehab people that say, oh, do this glute activation. If you don't have them squeezing their big toe or do RPR, you're just ingraining the wrong pattern. It actually makes them weaker, because I've tested it, and you've never tested that. Not one time has any PT that I've ever asked ever tested if that makes them stronger. That's the frustrating part, right?
So Cal, you mentioned RPR. We had a couple guys post questions in. They want more clarification on what is it. They don't understand it. Some people are saying it comes across as woo-woo. What is RPR?
Basically, it's just a series of reflexes, right? That we have these spots that the athlete does it on his own. It's a self-care system. Now, if you're working on somebody, it's basically be activated, right? Douglas is part of RPR. And Douglas has be activated, which you have to work on. And that's what I originally learned, but we switched it over to a model where the athlete just does these series of probably 4 to 5 minutes at the most. You can cut it. I can get it done in 2. I hit these series of reflexes that actually turn on these reflexes of how the body should work correctly. And, you know, ultimately it's an easy fix for a lot of things. When I say that, like, it was frustrating for me once I learned this system and realized that I'm going, okay, and I have an athlete that walks in and I know they're going to have knee pain, right? They're quad dominant. There's a quad issue. I start squatting them. Who gets blamed for the knee problem? I do, but it's not my squats. It's the problem they walked in the weight room with. It's their problem. It's not mine. But what RPR has allowed people to do is do this stuff to themselves daily to get rid of that quad problem. So then I don't get blamed for any like small nagging issues that people think, you know what I mean? I mean, there was a time where I had one trainer was like, oh, well, you must be squatting people wrong. I'm like, I write programs for 400 athletes right now, and I have 2 kids with knee pain. I have 800 legs. Don't you think if we were doing something wrong, like we have at least 200 or 300, not just 2? So like, it's crazy how people, especially the medical field, assumes it's our fault so many times, right? It's mind-numbing to me.
So with the now I know some of the RPR positions and everything, and obviously I don't want to give anything away to the listeners or anything, but where did the sites originate? What was the method behind those?
Yeah, I mean, they've been around for 100 years. They've been around as long as humans, but they're Chapman reflexes, and there's a ton of research coming out. People can look those up. But look, I ran across them before I found RPR, but I didn't know how to measure it, didn't know how to test it. And what RPR is basically a series and a sequence of those reflexes. And we found more. We've created methods for coaches to implement them effectively so that you can use these things. And some of the craziness that we've gotten from coaches, like this guy set a world record. I'm not using any names, but like results instantly. And the biggest thing, guys, is that, you know, the biggest one that you get your most bang from is the breathing. And everyone wants to talk about breathing. And I think it's obviously important and everyone have their methods. But RPR is the only system that actually like loosens up all the tissue, because you hit those spots yourself and all this tissue releases, and then each breath is more efficient. And guys, I've gotten as much as 1.5 inches out of somebody's rib cage after they do these resets for a series of days. So with each breath, your rib cage expands 1.5 inches more. So you can do whatever breathing method you recommend, but it just makes each of them like more effective. Every breath you take more effective, because that tissue's bound up. I tell people, it's like you take your t-shirt, and Mike, you wear super tight t-shirts, I know. And right, so you just like put it in your fingers and you bend it, and you see all these bands appear in your shirt.
They used to be super tight when I was fucking jacked. No more.
Yeah. Right, but that happens with your fascia and your tissue. So what we do with these bands, and people will do these spots and they'll be going, okay, I feel a band in there. Yeah, stay on a little longer, because that's that tissue wound up tight. And what RPR does is release that tissue, and it's a neurological change, because you can't really, if that tissue is bound up, it's a nervous system thing. And then what you do is it releases it, and then you're breathing, which turns on your psoas. It's crazy, but ultimately it's just a parasympathetic shift from being so sympathetic driven in our society, guys, right? I mean, the lights drive us into sympathetic state. Driving down the road is what, 300 more times stressful than walking through the woods, and that's how we're supposed to be moving. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, we're so sympathetic driven that it's pretty scary, you know? That's why you see all these kids with, you know, a lot of times it'll be or their flexors are turned on, because the flexors in their body, the shoulders roll forward, arms roll forward, are tied to the stress state, where the parasympathetic system is tied to the extensor muscles. So someone that's walking around with great posture naturally doesn't have to think about it. They're actually in a pretty good balance of parasympathetic to sympathetic state.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Total.
Yeah.
Well, if you go into an old folks home, and I ran some tests on a buddy's friend, and unfortunately, look, I've probably done over 10, 20, somewhere in between 10 and 20,000 heart rate variability tests. I mean, I've literally done heart rate variability tests with every drink, right, of myself. I've taken medicine, done heart rate variability, see what it does. Cold medicine, see what it does. But I went in, I tested a buddy's, father who's in an old folks home. And I found that his sympathetic and his parasympathetic system was fatigued. So the problem there is that your parasympathetic system can feel fatigued, even in an elite athlete. And you can't recover very well, right? But the problem when his sympathetic system was worn out, it means you have no ability to adapt. You can't give yourself that boost to survive. And then adrenaline levels were low, and within the month he had passed away because there was just nothing there, right? So when I say that, like in older folks that happens, but my point too is when you go in this old folks home, what happens? Many of them, their hands are curled. When they start to fade, their flexors have kicked in. Mm-hmm. So they're collapsing in front, right? And then all of a sudden, because their parasympathetic system, in my opinion, has also fatigued, so they can't recover. And then that's the start of the whole process. You know what I mean? If you think about it, we're born in flexion. You try to get to extension our whole life. And then if you slowly at the end are dying, in my opinion, of a more natural cause, let's say, your flexors start to become dominant. I don't know if they can become dominant. I think it's just the extensors are fatigued and worn out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's also the psychological influence based on the dominance hierarchy too, right? Like if you're feeling threatened and you're in this sympathetic state, you're much more protective. You know, you're completely spot on there. And there's also a lot of nice techniques. I remember the original bioenergetics work from a psychiatrist, Alexander Levin, where he gets people to rapidly breathe completely in an extensed state, like almost bent over the back of a chair to try to kick their system back in. So
I mean, it's exactly. And again, the state we live in is so stressed. I mean, our kids, everybody, like half these, I have buddies who are pretty high level, some executives, right? And you're like they're like, why do I have to take these hormones because mine are bad? I'm like, well, we'll go on a 6-month vacation. They'll probably like fix themselves. But who the hell can go on a 6-month vacation, right? Yeah. And you can't feel bad. You're just a victim of your own success, right? That's all it is. Like, don't feel bad. You're a victim of your own success because you weren't designed to run 16, 17-hour days like you do, but you have to be successful. And this is what we choose, you know what I'm saying? So that's the hard part.
So I need to thank you, by the way, because when did RPR come out? What, 5, or you started pushing RPR like 4 years ago?
4 years ago, yeah, no.
So I don't know if you know this, I'm getting my doctorate in acupuncture now.
Oh, nice.
And it's literally because of a conversation that you and I had. And then it was, I think Aaron Wellman and I really started, he was a former strength coach with the Giants. He's now with Indiana.
Yeah, I know Aaron.
And we started diving into the RPR deep to try to find some explanations, and nothing was making sense to me. So because of that, and people were starting to go and like, oh, fascial matrix and this and that, and there's, all this shit connected. So I said, all right, fuck it. I'm just going to learn as much as I can from the people that allegedly know the most about fascia and the pathways and everything associated with acupuncture. So that there's a big shout out to Cal Dietz. Thank you very much for pushing me to fucking grow. You were one of the main pushers in that direction.
Well, yeah, it gets scary. Mike, here's the reality of that whole thing. So I would tell you there's probably, how many meridians do they consider, like 12 main ones maybe? Is it 10, 12?
So there's 12 main meridians, but there's over 72 that we kind of come across, but there's more than that.
Now, so for example, So acupuncture.
How the fuck did you know the 12 meridians, by the way?
Dude, what do you think I've been reading my whole life? Like, all right. So this gets scary. Well, actually, I dug into some cellular level stuff and the flow of electrons, right? So really, in my opinion, what acupuncture is when you place those needles, it causes vasodilation, but it opens up areas that are like stagnated, and the flow of electrons through the acupuncture meridians is now opened back up, right? So a cell that doesn't have proper flow of electrons, and people talk about it's chi and magic and all, it's not. It's just electrons. That's what it is. It's quantum physics, really. Okay, so it's for real. So if you have those 12 meridians, here's what I'll do is I will take a crystal with a string and hold it over that main point of that meridian. And if it has a positive charge and it's a healthy, it will spin clockwise over top of the person's, let's say the heart meridian. If that meridian is negatively charged and stuck somewhere, it will spin counterclockwise. Now, if you can take a crystal and put it over the positive end of a battery, it will spin clockwise. People can check it right now. And if you put it over the negative end, it will spin counterclockwise. So let me tell you this much. How did those people, and I say those people, I meant whoever created acupuncture, figure this out 3,000 years ago? That's my big question. I don't know how it's possible. Because I mean, Mike, I have devices where I can check the voltage of that meridian. And then I follow it through the body and I reach, let's say it's the heart meridian. Well, I find the heart meridian spot on my feet. I recharge that with a simple electrical millivolt device. And I can actually change a negative spin into a positive spin by hooking my device on the heart meridian through the toes, because that meridian theoretically will run all the way up to the heart and recharge everything. And I've gotten into this in the last couple of years. So Mike, here's the next thing. Think about this. All the muscles that are on that heart meridian, let's say, and it does run through the hamstring. If you have a weak heart meridian, the hamstring muscles, in my opinion, that pull will be the ones on that heart meridian, because those electrons are low. The tissue's not going to function correctly. It's going to be more tight because it can't recover from your workouts. Like, it gets pretty deep. We could probably spend a weekend going over all this stuff together.
So just to be clear, the heart meridian that you may be referring to in the foot. So the heart meridian actually goes through the arm. Are you referring to the foot? I believe it's called the foot. Oh my gosh, Italian. Shaoyan, the foot Shaoyin.
Yeah, I believe, because
so that's the kidney meridian.
Well, but all the meridians will run through the feet and the hands together, in my understanding. They'll be connected in some way.
Yes.
I'm not sure.
So
okay.
the heart meridian is connected to the kidney meridian down in the foot. So where on the foot are you running it?
Well, I have them all on a chart, so I don't know them by memory. So I'll just, you know what I mean? So, and I just use the heart as an example. Rarely in my athletes has the heart meridian been off. You know what I'm saying? In my athletes. But they will have something that's off. What are you using? You can actually just hook them on the terminals. You can hook this device on the terminals left to right side of the heart, the main terminal, wherever you would hold that crystal. And then also in the hand, you can hook them in the hand. So anywhere along that meridian where, if you can follow the charts that were made 3,000 years ago, right? All you have to do is know those. And I haven't memorized them because I just pull out my charts and hook shit up. It's scary. Like, it's scary. What they thought, what they were able to find back then. I actually have a hard time believing they figured that out. I don't know how they did. So aliens, I don't know.
Well, so my professor said, he asked one of his professors way back, so how'd they come up with this? And the guy said to him straight face, the aliens.
Yeah.
I said, oh, that's fucking great. Thanks.
I'm getting my PhD based on aliens, right?
Fucking great. Thanks. This is good. This is good. So So where did you, now you're going into electroacupuncture aspect of things. Who were you reading in regards to that?
Well, yeah, I think it started with Volts, you know what I mean? And then Dr. You know what else? One second, his name's over here. It's Dr. Gosh, he's out of Austin, Texas. Jerry Tennant.
Don't tell me Tennant.
I read some of his stuff.
Healing is voltage.
Yeah, that stuff, right?
Okay, right on.
If you dig around there, and then, you know, I read a ton of variables, obviously, with all kinds of stuff. Actually, where I found him was doing the lectures on the cell and the electron stuff. And then I read some more of his stuff, and then I just kept following up, and then I mean, I think Yes is pointing me to a guy that does a ton on mitochondria and just the nutrients involved in that. But really, it's just the electron flow through the cells and how they heal themselves, and the nutrients you're missing is basically, you know, helping with that electron flow. And then, you know, the electron transport chain. I mean, that's why sodium load and potassium load, athletes, where you get a huge change in things. You know what I mean? Especially millivolts in the brain and DC potential.
Yeah,
because they're moving electrons around.
Yeah, so Tennant bases a lot of his stuff off of, and he tries to make a more Western approach because he's a Western doctor.
Yeah.
And he doesn't do any of his lectures. It's funny, he doesn't do any of his lectures under his medical license. He does it under his holistic license because he'll get sued and he'll lose his license. But he bases a lot of things, and this is where the alkaline conversation comes into play as well. He bases everything off of the pH of the cell, and the pH is measured in voltage. So if the pH is a little low, the voltage is low. If the pH is high, the voltage is high. You want high voltage. You want high electrons, because when you're high in electrons, you're able to donate electrons, and that means you're in a healing state. And they associated that also. I think in his book, he was discussing the salamander tail and how they were, and where the stem cells actually came from. It wasn't the marrow. The stem cells came from the fascia. And that's why by manipulating the fascia, they were able to increase some kind of stem cell or some kind of electron. I don't even know, right? So some kind of positive impact associated with, because with acupuncture, you're manipulating the fascia. You're not manipulating necessarily the direct muscle or the blood. Well,
yes, it would appear to me. And how does the electrons flow through the body in these meridians? The fascia. So when it's gunked up, Mike, it doesn't flow very well, right? And you're going, okay. And even if I find it gunked up somewhere, and you can muscle test, let's say a hamstring, I'm going through the hamstring and I muscle test the strength, and all of a sudden I hit that gunked up fascia with my thumb and I touch it, and then the muscle goes weak. That's actually probably a neurological pattern that's just screwed up because you're causing some pain. But when you acupuncture that and it goes away, you're allowing that flow of electrons to go through now. Same thing with tattoos. I mean, I've seen those have inhibit they're just like scars. They're the same. Scars and tattoos will inhibit that flow of those electrons running through the body.
Yeah. There's scar treatments. What's really interesting is I've seen treatments on scars. One is I have a guy who's had multiple orthoscopic shoulder surgeries, but I mean, the whole point of the orthoscopic surgery is that it's supposed to be really small. You put a needle right next to the scar. You don't put it in the scar. You don't have to needle the scar, but you put it next to the scar, and the entire scar completely collapses, which means all the tissue associated with that musculature that's in the deltoid, they go right into the posterior delt. Yeah. It's gone. It's fucking gone. And you can guarantee there's a hole that they burned all the way fucking through to get to wherever they wanted to do in order to get there. That whole area of tissue is gone. Right now, if that, not only does that inhibit the contractile ability of the muscle, the proprioception of the muscle, but it'll also inhibit the messages sent through the fascia. Now, in regards to meridians, now this is my personal thought process. I read a book called The Spark in the Machine. Good book, easy read. And he had said, I forget the guy's name, he had said that meridians is kind of a Western word for it, whereas realistically, it channels is more appropriate because meridians is kind of, I don't know, it's almost like woo-woo-y, whereas the fascial pathways, that's what the quote unquote meridians allegedly are in this book is what he said. So
makes sense.
So it's the fascial pathway where, let's say you have your large intestine starts here, it'll end up going all the way in here, right? The UB, the urinary bladder meridian, starts here and goes all the way there, down your back, and goes all the way through. Right. So, you know, if you look at the occipital protuberance, and you palpate that, no wonder the glutes come on.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that does make some sense to me.
Right. Well, the thing about the glutes with RPR, we think it goes back to all that. Who was the Middle Eastern developmental guys in regards to? I can't even believe I'm forgetting their name. But if you think about it, on the occipital bone, if you rub that, that's your first extension pattern, Mike, as a child, is to root for food, right? Mm-hmm. And then the other glute area is right behind the jaw, which is your second extension pattern to open the mouth to feed. Mm-hmm. So this is why we think it's all tied together with those developmental, right, patterns that exist in the body, especially with RPR.
Yeah, I tried. So I dove down deep in the rabbit hole of RPR when it first came about. Without, and full disclosure, without getting the fucking cert, I tried learning all about it, just because, I'm a fucking idiot. So one thing that I thought was really interesting, and then when I learned about that, they actually brought it out in acupuncture. If you go to fetal development, right, what's the first thing to develop in the fetus is essentially the spinal cord, right? Yep. The central nervous system develops first. So this is connected to this. And those were the first networks of fascia that really started developing, yes. right around the central nervous system. So essentially, that whole aspect from head to ass, from skull to sacrum, is really the main conductor, the main transmitter of energy. Everything is stored there. Everything is received there. Everything is sent out from there. So if you manipulate the thorax or the skull or the pelvis in any way, it can and will have an impact on an extremity somewhere else. You can manipulate somewhere else on the body through the spinal cord. Now, if you go to acupuncture, you go to the UB channel, which is the spinal cord. There's something called back shu points. And through the back shu points, you can access every single organ. And every single organ goes to every single limb. And that's what the thing about acupuncture is. If you impact one point on a channel, anywhere on the channel, it will have an impact on the entire channel, whether it's the muscle sinews, whether it's whatever it is with the channel, associated with the channel, it will have an impact. And every channel also has an impact. It has a partner channel. So when you said the foot heart meridian, that's known as the Shao Yin. Hand Shao Yin, foot Shao Yin. The foot Shao Yin is the kidney. So if you have a weak heart meridian, you could impact it through the kidney because of that hand-foot relationship. That's why distal acupuncture works. I'm so sorry that I'm going on this huge fucking rant with it.
Go, man. It's good.
No, it's exactly right. Like, people have to realize with the things that we're spilling out here, man, you have to realize how dynamic this organism we are trying to train is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's some scary stuff, right? I mean, stuff that just things like, just the patterns too, where Mike, you find that if the glute med's off, it's tied to the opposite paraspinal. And every time you get somebody with a glute med that's been off for a while, I just did the other day a goalie. Glute med was off on the right side and she had problems for 2 months. I showed her trainer how tight her left paraspinal was going to be. And he was like, how did you know? I'm like, before I even touched it, I'm like, watch this. And it's because if that glute med's off, the body doesn't feel stable. So it goes to the paraspinal and locks the opposite side down. Mm-hmm. Right? That's just those chains. And the thing is that people have to realize that, in my opinion, when they think of the core, really in Corfus and a guy named Dan Fichter, through conversations, the core really is the spine. right? So the brain protects, as you talk about protecting things, protects the brain first. The eyes are also part of the brain, so it protects them. But then the next reaction is to protect the spine, which is the sequence that should happen. So when people talk about training the spine or the core, really it's the spinal erectors and their reactivity. You know what I mean? So when people train the core nice and slow or abflexion, I'm like, in my opinion, if you aren't on your feet and you're not moving something to stabilize the spine or cause reaction, you're not training the core. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's how you have to, in my opinion, have to look at it. Your spinal erectors, all the paraspinals. And then here's the beauty. What's the core set on? In my opinion, it's setting right on the hips. And if the hips are working correctly, I've never found a core that's not working, in my opinion, correctly through various tests and strength tests if your hips are turned on, because the hips hold the core in place, if that's what you want to say. Because they're just sitting right on top of it. So I include the hips into that. Some people do, but I don't know if they know why they do. But yeah, it's, and then again, the whole bracing of everything, right? I've gone on so many tangents of that. I mean, I didn't believe it years ago, and I really didn't believe it after I read Smell Stiff Super Training posts on it when they started talking about it, right? I don't know if you guys were on that Super Training.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right? Like that was – and then I flew out there to see him for a few days. But he talked about it, and he didn't – it just didn't make sense to him, and he gave some examples. But then I just tested. I had people bench press bracing their core, and the bar slowed down. I had them run a 20, 40-yard dash. They ran slower. I'm like, so why in the hell am I going to have them do everything slower if they're going to brace their core? You know what I mean?
I think what was misconstrued with the whole bracing of the core thing is it's a good thing for when people are restricted, right? If you have pain and you're trying to re-educate the motor patterns to be pain-free, because again, pain is more perception than it is reality, right? Like we're perceiving pain. So if you're bracing the core when you're injured, it's going to create stability and it's going to increase confidence, which long-term, hey, that's what we want. But that's not the end all be all. That is a step one sort of thing is like, hey, is the transverse abdominis working? And what's interesting, I wanted to circle back to the RPR. Now your quad point with the RPR is can I say where it is?
Yeah.
Okay. Is the oblique, correct?
Yeah, it's right on the bottom of the rib oblique. There's a few, and then you rub the VMO spot, right? Like fish hook the VMO. Is another one, and then at level 2 will go up right the IT band. So yeah, we have a number, but
right. So have you noticed that the quad point is a fix not only for that oblique point? Have you noticed that it not only fixes the quad, but it will also address a glute med issue, or that it can also address a piriformis issue, or that it can also address a hip flexor issue or a groin issue? Have you had any success with that point? Being a jack of all trades? And
so here's what I found. I found that, again, each of my athletes are different when they compensate. Because I thought at first I'd write down all these patterns, I'd figure it all out. But then there's no way, right? So it will fix your quad, but then it might fix someone else's groin because the quad was screwing things up. But so my point is like, yes, you're right with all those, but I don't know why, right? And it's different with each individual. So you still have, you know what I mean? So you still have to hit almost everything at some point or another. The glute med for sure. Why? Because, well, if the glute med is causing instability, or if the glute med's not working, let's say, and then it causes various things to happen, like, and then the quad becomes more of a hip flexor because of everything's not working in there, then yes, if you hit that quad area and the glute med gets a reaction, it will make a lot of things in the whole hip area musculature better. But that's not the case every time, right? Even within my sports, I find other things that are off on people.
Totally.
I think it's genetics. Like I'll watch an athlete walk and I'll see some similarities in their dads or their mothers, whoever you know what I mean? So and again, it's not like always bad. It's just how they compensate to survive.
So here's, I do have a theory, Brooker. I'm so sorry I'm talking so fast.
Easy. No, dude, you're good. You're good.
So I do have a theory on one of the reasons as to why that is an effective point. And there's a couple of areas on there that of the chart, the old chart that I have from 4 years ago or whatever it is. That's associated with something in acupuncture called the daimai. Now, the daimai is the transverse abdominis. Essentially, in the way I look at it, that's the transverse abdominis. That's your weight belt. And what does the transverse abdominis do? It connects the upper to the lower. And when there's any dysfunction in the transverse abdominis, there's going to be pelvic dysfunction. Or if there's any dysfunction in the pelvis, there's going to be dysfunction in the transverse abdominis. That's why you have guys, when they have SIJ, sacroiliac joint dysfunction, you have them lie down on the ground and contract their transverse abdominis and try to crush your hand. One side could go, one side may not. And it's just because it's not recruiting properly, because either a poor motor pattern or there's pain associated with the contraction of it. So by rubbing the shit out of that area or placing an acupuncture needle in that area, what does it do? It increases proprioception. And through the enhancement of proprioception, muscles are able to fire. The perception of pain alleviates.
Yeah. Oh no, it's some power. Well, as you know now, with your getting your PhD
and just to be clear, it's not a PhD; it's a doctorate. So doctorate's practical, PhD is more research.
Yeah. Okay. So the one that makes more sense to me then, right? So that seems more useful, much more useful. Anyway, you're just like these. As you see, these things can be RPR, and these reflexes come probably from some level of this, Eastern medicine, obviously. And you're like, the whole thing is so tied together. I mean, how can the arch reset that we have get rid of the opposite shoulder pain? Well, it makes sense now through all the slings, right? But like, it's just hard for me to fathom. And that we think we know so much, and man, I've read I don't know how many thousands of books and articles, and yet I feel like I know 1% of really what's going on, right?
I think we know less than that, right?
Yeah, maybe.
Cal, I've got a question for you, mate. So obviously we see all of these discrepancies and incorrect movement patterns and stuff like this. Now, you mentioned that you feel like it might be genetically influenced through different people. From a pure survival basis, if there was a big threat and we needed to turn our body system onto, superhuman style, are we able, with the correct amount of emotional distress, to be able to bypass all of this to do you understand where I'm trying to get to? Like, because I can't imagine that in terms of evolution, that because our right glute med isn't firing properly, that we're not able to sprint away if we need to. You understand what I mean?
And I'll be honest with you, I think with the release of adrenaline that comes at you, you can bypass, things will turn on emotionally. Because like some people say, well, I had all this strength. Well, no, I think you always had it. And then what happens is sometimes they get hurt, right? Well, I pulled my hamstring you pulled your hamstring because you were in a hamstring compensation pattern before. Once everything kicked in, that tissue has been so beat up over the years that you just had a problem with it at that point. But everything was turned on. You felt really strong. Yes. I think adrenaline does amazing stuff from that sense, but it only lasts about 10 seconds, right? Adrenaline, that whole push. Some type O blood types might hold a little longer. But yeah, it's to survive when you really feel threatened. You'll, in my opinion, you'll bypass all these patterns that are bad and go back to the real ones to survive. Let's hope you do. You know what I mean? This is why you feel like you can run faster, and that running felt different when you were legitimately thought you were running for your life.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, when you start hearing about mothers that have had a car crash and then they're all of a sudden able to flip the car over because their kids are inside, and you see, You know, so I don't know. The next point I wanted to bring up, I mean, you mentioned that you have, you know, such sophisticated technology available to you there, and, you know, you're really, you know, pioneering the field with testing new stuff out. Do you feel like, since we've gone over with acupuncture and the history of that, is everything really just repackaged new from what's going on? Or do you think that we're able to now, with the new technology that we have available, actually create new techniques, new methods, new philosophies?
Yeah. I've always found, I thought, maybe you guys can give your opinion, but like science seems to be about 10 to 15 years behind coaches, right? I mean, coaches have done complex patterns or like, you know, like complexes with hurdles and weights and stuff for years. And then science came out, you know, just in the last 10 to 15 years saying, oh yeah, it causes potentiation and all this. Well, it's like, yeah, but coaches have known this for 40 years or 50, you know what I mean? So it's a little frustrating. I don't know if people ask enough hard questions. So here's a realistic aspect of it. You know, you have all these sports scientists, but like, I don't see them asking all the right questions because they really don't have enough training experience behind most of them, right?
Yeah.
There are some out there that I would call on that have enough training experience, but people have gone, you know, they're hoping the science brings something new, but they don't even know what's, they have no idea. And again, I just go back to my methods of chatting is that, like, I just create problems that I didn't even know existed through questioning everything. And then hopefully I can find a way to measure it. If I can find a way to measure it, then I can do something with it and see if I can get a change. If I can't get a change, then I just haven't found the answer yet, you know? So yeah, it's nerve-wracking because there's all these smart people in the field that I think they should be driving the field because of the positions they hold. But I don't see them doing a whole lot. I'll be honest with you. I've learned more from high school coaches talking to them than I have any sports scientists I've ever met. I'm going to be honest with you. And I'm talking coaches that have been in business 15 to 20 years that go to a bunch of clinics because I start to see those high school coaches all the time. And the things that they've showed me and they've tried and they say work, I'm like, this is way better than any scientist dude I've ever met. You know, like when I met Chris Corfus, he was like, hey, Cal, I use Triphasic. And I was like, and he's like, yeah, I got some pretty good results. He says, I have 6 high school kids that jump over 36 inches on their vertical. And, you know, I didn't know Chris at the time. And he's as, you know, when he says something, it's legit. He measures everything too. I said, send me a video. And he sent me a video of kids doing a vertical jump with their hands on their hips at 36 inches. And he had 30 kids over like 30. And I got in my truck and drove down to see what this high school coach was doing to Chicago. It was 6 hours, right? And him and I become great friends and obviously developed our PR and everything along with it. But it's like, I've learned more from high school coaches who actually ask questions and are willing to learn. And I think there's a lot of them now, and other coaches are willing to learn, right? But again, I just test everything, and I don't think our field's progressing as fast as it should. And you're right with the repackaging, but I'm okay with repackaging as long as you give me something a little better. You know what I mean? And I share a lot of stuff, and I just want people to say, hey, I tried this and it's a little bit better. I'll give people credit. Like people think like the French contrast, I get emails all the time about that, how good it is. But I didn't invent it. People think I did. Like Giles Cometti invented it. It actually wasn't even Giles Cometti, the scientist. It was the Warner Gunthers. You remember the shot putter guy, the world champion? Yeah.
I fucking love those videos.
Jean-Pierre Egger.
Yeah, Jean-Pierre. I think it was Jean-Pierre that invented the French contrast. Giles Cometti researched it and wrote about it, but it was Jean-Pierre. And yeah, but people think it's mine because I wrote about it. And I gave him full credit, but it's like, guys, and I have some variations of that now, obviously, and some crazy good stuff with it. But it's like, I'm okay with repackaging. We just got to give credit and then make it like, let's make it more like effective then and test it and figure it out, right? That's the whole thing. And our field's struggling right now with that. And then how about this one? If somebody comes up with something good, no one believes them because the Instagram, everyone has the next best thing when it's just a repackaged deal, right? So you don't know who to trust when when they're trying to sell something or give you an idea. It's crazy, frustrating.
Cal, why do you coach, man? I mean, I can feel how much you love this, and you're like all in on this. What drives you, bro?
Yeah, actually, you know what? I had a coach ask me that one day, and you know who it was? It was actually Bill Belichick. And he's asking me, why do you coach? And I was like, coach, he's like, I said, I just want to walk into arena and I like to look at the other team and know that I'm so prepared that you can't beat me today. And that's what I want to know. You know what I mean? And then really the other thing would be that I'm always looking how to make it better, right? And if each workout, like Hank Cranoff says, is a new biological experiment. If you look at it that way, I don't know how this could ever get boring to anybody. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I've done 7, 8 omega wave tests on people during the course of the day to watch them work out, to watch how their body responds. I do all kinds of experiments. Take supplements, see how it reacts. Takes this, see how things react. So, I mean, I have a list of stuff that I'll probably never get through, but it'll be, I'll give it a shot.
So what are you doing on top of coaching? Because a guy like you, your mind is always going. I remember even at that lecture 8 years ago or whatever the fuck it was. Oh, and by the way, even to this day, I make every single one of my interns that come in, they have to read 2 books. They have to read 2 books. They have to read Charlie Francis Training System and Triphasic Training. Every single one of my fucking interns has to read Triphasic Training. And they say, why? I say, you'll see. You'll fucking see. And by the way, they get tested on it. I tell them, I say, every single time you walk in here, you're not allowed to come in here until you finish those 2 books, and you have to fucking take a test on both those books the second you walk in my fucking door. So I hold you in very, very high regard, regardless of any shit I may be talking.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you. But I remember even 8 years ago or whatever it was, when I heard you at the CVASPS seminar talking about even getting guys into a sympathetic state and a parasympathetic state just using headphones and having certain frequencies. So I know you have other things that you're always working on, but what the fuck are they?
Well, those obviously tones this was from a chiropractor, and those worked really well. Again, that one was hard because once I found RPR, then I found I could shift that parasympathetic state on with just one breath, right? So, I mean, I had a world-class wrestler. He was at 200. He did his French contrast set, and 43 seconds later, he was at 67 on his resting heart rate. So his ability to shift in and out, it became effective with breathing. I will recommend, actually right now, I just got a new device. It's an EEG that measures brainwaves. So I'll be able to put somebody, the binaural tones, you guys know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, binaural beats. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but there's frequencies that affect people differently. Now there's like the regulation, like there's a normal meditation or relaxation or stimulus one, but then there's the hertz within that. I have a device now that they claim, I haven't got it hooked up. I got it all unpacked. That says you put those in and it'll run a frequency test, and it will watch when your brain waves change, so that when you go to meditation, you need this hertz with this frequency, because there's a whole broad span up there. People don't know when it changes their brain, and that's one thing. Like I just got that device. I'll let you know if it's legit as I think it is. Okay. The brain obviously controls everything. I mean, I got cold lasers here. I got all kinds of stuff that, I think the biggest thing is I'm trying to really individualize training for coaches, like on the exercise, like the glute ham. I have a whole series of stuff like that on exercises to tell you how to do a particular exercise with what load and when to do it. And I'll put those in classes, and I want to make those. So for like young coaches, I mean, if the more I can get these young coaches advanced, then hopefully the more to push the old people in the field to think a little bit too. You know what I mean? the millivolt exercise or stuff for like Chinese acupuncture. Yeah, I just haven't been able to get it all in right now. I'm working on, and then honestly testing. Guys, I have a 1020 tool I called where I took 20 years of numbers on a 10-20 yard dash. I had bench press, squats, vertical jumps with that, pro agilities. And I was able to take a 10-yard split out of a 20-yard dash and be able to predict what's your weakness, right? So when I say that, do you need strength, power, or speed work? And it's not based off the 20, it's based off the splits and body height and weights. And I went through all my numbers and found the cutoffs with the computer, and it told me that, hey, this kid ran a 10-20 yard dash and he needs strength. I'd look and his back squat was 270 at a body weight of 200. Okay, that's legit. And then by the time he was a senior squatting, 385, 400, the formula told me he needed more speed. So here's a really quick. So this is a weak link indicator. This is a rate limiter indicator when you run a 20-yard dash. So how I do my training now is Monday morning, kids run a 20-yard dash. I have 7 different workouts that they could be doing. They run the 20-yard dash. We put it in. The formula tells us they need speed. He does speed. His buddy runs the same 20-yard dash with a different 10 split. He has completely different program. He has super-maximal strength loading.
You're using the 1080 sprint for that?
No, well, you can, but I just have my 1020 tool. I can put it out there. It's a video explaining how to use it. Just put a 10 in it and the 20 split, the height and the weight of the person.
Gotcha.
And guys, here's the scary thing. So traditional periodization, I knew it was wrong for how many years? 20? I knew it wasn't optimal. I shouldn't say wrong because it works. But what happened was I just graphed out my athletes over the course of summer what they needed. And I had other coaches do about 200 kids. Guess how many kids? Now this wasn't telling you, this was just telling you what they should train. And we graphed it out afterwards. How many people followed something close to the traditional periodization model out of a couple hundred? Do you know how many? 20%. So we've only gotten periodization right for basically 20% of the humans that have ever trained under it. How about this? 30% of the people would have reversed the model. We would have got it more right if we'd reversed the model for people. And then the other 50% left over was just a mixture. They were going all over the place, right?
What periodization model?
Let's just say like typical high volume to decrease in reps. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Yeah.
Basic linear.
Yeah, basic linear, let's say. And you're just like, how could it, like, so then, and I'm only saying this tool works for you if you sprint. If your sport involves sprinting, this 10-20 tool will tell you what your weakest link is. And guys, like, just quick, I had 3 girls that were pretty strong in my program that got invited to the Olympic national team tryouts, and they got speed readings all summer. They never once went over 50% load because they were strong enough, in my opinion, but this formula was right. And when they went to the camp and tested strength, those 3 were in the top 5 of the 100 hockey players in the country. And they'd never been above 50% on the bench press. And they only did speed work the whole summer, which told me we did the right work because they were still in the top 5, 3 of them from my gym. Now, people have to realize if my girls are benching 85 pounds for speed, they are actually pulling that 85 down on their chest, stopping it, which causes about 400 or 500 pounds of force, and then reversing it as fast as they possibly can. And when they do that, we actually have to hold the rib cage. So like, that's the thing. Like, people walk in my gym and they have no idea what's going on. I'll have an athlete benching high speed, high velocity, and someone has to hold them on the bench because they're benching it so hard and so fast that it will lift them off the bench, right? I mean, years ago, I had a pretty elite coaches walk in, and they saw my athletes squatting on their toes, not squatting, but single leg squatting on their toes, doing step ups on their toes, right? Floating heel just off the ground. And they thought I was the craziest shit. And they never asked me why. And I'm like, I can tell you why. But, and I'm like, if you don't want to ask me, I don't care. Because you don't concern me then. You know what I'm saying? how many years ago, 15, I switched all my plyometrics over to not trying to let the heel touch the ground when they jumped. I mean, I was walking through the gym, saw the best Big Ten rebounder in the country, or one of the best in the country, best in the Big Ten. And when he did a series of 3 rebounds going after the ball, his heels never touched the ground. I'm like, why am I teaching him to land on his heels when he never lands on his heels when he runs, when he never lands on his heels when he's rebounding? So I stopped jumping, having athletes, it was always on their toes. Only animal that runs on their heels in this world is an elephant. That's it. And the actual elephant's still on their toes because I got corrected by an elephant person. The fat pad of the elephant is touching the ground, but the bone doesn't. So I was wrong, right? Don't tell my ex-wife again. So. But you see what I mean? So like, yeah, you come to my gym and you see stuff that, like, if you don't ask, you won't understand. There's no reason, you know? I mean, people watch me at the beginning of the summer. You watch me, and my hockey players are running terrible, and I'm just watching. But I'm watching for the next couple of weeks to see what methods I feel fixes those running problems. So I don't coach them. I just coach effort. They have to run frigging hard. And you watch how their arms come in over the course of the year when I get those feet dialed in, when I get those hip stabilizers dialed in. So I try not to coach certain things that I don't have to if I can fix it with the training and RPR. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Sure. That must be a fucking nightmare to try and organize, though, because if you're working with so many different people and all these different sports and then trying to individualize it based on, you know, a pre-test first thing in the morning, and then still manage to still include, you know, different feet work or any of the RPR stuff involved. I mean, how are you sort of templating this up?
So, yeah, so basically I'll have, let's say, 7 workouts. And they'll run it. They'll run the 20-yard dash, and kids got strength, kids got speed. And look, I have 7 or 8 interns running around setting everything up before. So we test this. They know. They walk in. 2 kids ran a 2.7 in a pro or in a 10, but they have completely different programs. And then what I'm looking at doing for all this individualization stuff. So let's say we have like a French contrast today. They'll do a hurdle hop, and then like one of the things I'll do after a bilateral movement if I have to do them. Because, guys, I've tested bilateral movements. Let's say you test squat, close your eyes, get on a force plate. Your balance is screwed up. And then if you march in place and recheck it, it will be exactly where it's supposed to be, like what you normally are. And you can do a hurdle hop and it's messed up. Why? Because the bilateral movements, in my opinion, are a really negative feedback loop. So how do you fix that? So after 4, let's say I put up 4 hurdles, they do a hurdle hop, they just march in place 4 reps and it fixes it, right? So you'll come to my gym, you'll see an athlete go through hurdles and you'll see him march 4 times. And then, for example, individualization, I may have that athlete sprint for 20 yards. The next athlete may do a build-up flying 10 after the hurdle hop. The next athlete might do a Deion Sanders run. Do you know, you guys, what I'm talking about, those straight leg Deion Sanders, like when he's scoring a touchdown? One athlete may do flying Deion runs because his glute pattern at high end speeds isn't correct. And another athlete might be doing bent leg Deion Sanders accelerations to work more hamstring, but also include the glute. So what I'll have is I'll have a sheet that says, okay, when you're in your French contrast, I've identified you as this. So there'll be another sheet that we're working on. And then anytime you have individualization of a day, I'm basically going to make a checkbox on Excel sheets, and then it'll tell them exactly their foot position because of everything I've identified. So yeah, I'm working on that.
So to bring it back, but by the way, you must fucking just be a computer maniac, printing out all these programs 24/7 with all this shit, writing them like crazy. Are you behind a screen a lot of the time?
No, I just like, so when we go to print those out, yeah, one kid will get 7 programs, but that's actually pretty good until he gets stronger. You know what I mean? So those programs will work because I just print them all out at once. Somebody does. I don't even do that. Okay. Right? I hate the computer. So
yeah. Okay. Fair. Good.
Yeah. So they'll print it out, right? And he has them. And unless he gets like 20 to 30 to 40 pounds heavier, like on his squat or something really fast, then I won't change his sheets until then. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Until the wheels fall off.
Yeah. Until we retest. Or, you know, his 80% looks so light, then I'll tell my assistant, hey, write this down, bump him up 30 fucking pounds, because his 80% he could do for like 7-8 reps, and then reprint the sheets. And they will, you know what I mean? So it's not that big a deal.
So with your hockey players, you are sprinting them.
Oh yeah, we run every day. I run 6 reps. So it depends on that day of the week. So I will, when you walk into my gym, we do a quick warm up. We'll do a dynamic warm up, and then we run 6 sprints, 5 days a week, full speed, whether it's at 20, whether it's a pro agility, whether it's around circles. I love circles, guys. The big circle loops. Mm-hmm. For ankle stability, mobility, in my opinion, that's a big one. And then we'll do like wicket drills in between, various things. I got, some neural perplexity, but yeah, we run 6 reps. Everyone goes, why 6? Everyone seems to slow down after 6.
So why wickets with hockey players?
Well, their foot strike's terrible when they run, right? So I found it a way, when we do the wickets, their foot position's held better. And again, it's just something I saw seem to improve their running. And then I like to put, honestly, I'll cut up little mats and put them in between the wickets, because if they think there's something in there that's uneven, it actually forces them to hold their foot in position. So you're tricking them, like when they run, that there's some unevenness in the ground, and they will actually hold their foot in a better position upon striking, because their brains think there's a problem down there.
So I've talked to Paf, and he says even the elite sprinters, like a Usain Bolt, his heel will touch the ground and come back up. Oh, yeah. So he'll when he coaches guys, he will coach. He'll coach a whole foot amortization.
Yeah.
In some patterns. So what do you say to counter that?
Well, the problem is, I agree with him. My guys will heel strike, but it's not very much compared to the forefoot, right? Yeah. So when they run, their heels strike the ground. And in those wickets, I'm not trying to keep the heel from hitting the ground. I'm trying to get that foot, because they may land on their heels. And then when I put those little things in between the wickets that they feel might be uneven, their foot seems to be gathered underneath them. So it's kind of a reaction to the unevenness of the ground to put that foot in the right place. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. And Dan's dead right on that. Like, yeah, the heel strikes the ground, of course, but all the forces run through the forefoot.
Yes.
Right?
100%. 100%.
In my plyos, when my athletes are going through hurdles, I'll be like, land on your toes. And I don't care if your heels hit the ground, but all that force needs to come through the toes. That's what I coach. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not afraid to let the heel hit the ground, because it does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So now to take it back, like I wanted to before, knowing that your guys get stronger. I talked to Rolf Oman, and he's a guest that we had earlier on the show. He's a really fucking good track and field coach.
He's the creator of the 1080. The original creator of the device, the 1080 Quantum and the 1080 Sprint.
Yeah.
So he had said to me that guys soleus are weak as piss. He said, you watch people run, he said, you could just tell right away. So he spends a ton of time training someone soleus. Now, when you're doing those balancing exercises, essentially, the single leg ankle exercises that you have them do, right? Yeah. Essentially, you're doing that in a submaximal load, and they are getting stronger without making it a supramaximal effort. Why will you pick and choose conceptually some battles with supramaximal and some battles with submaximal? What is your rhyme and reason for that?
So I picked the main lift supramaximal, and really it's mainly one is my safety bar split squat, right?
And that's when they're holding on to shit too, right?
Yeah, because I'm not concerned about balance at this time, right? So 120% load, held 10 seconds in a deep position, is ugly. It's a huge hormonal response. Guys, it even, like those little handheld devices that improve blood pressure, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have seen blood pressure drop. I've seen resting heart rates drop in 2 weeks, 12 beats, doing no conditioning on that Supra-maximal isometric loading. I had, like, it's actually in my GPP on my YouTube page, some of the changes. My guys have some extremely high bone density, and so do my women from that. And I feel that it's the Supra-maximal. This is the main lift. And why am I doing it? I'm trying to get as strong. Let's be honest, to waste time getting strong is going to hurt you in your speed, in my opinion. So I do Supra-maximal loading to get as strong as I can, as fast as possible. So my pro hockey players, they go Supra-maximal loading 4 weeks a year, and the rest of the year is under 80%, in my opinion. Does that make sense?
And what do you start off with the Supra-maximal? Do you do an accumulation period first? How will you phase in and phase out that Supra-maximal loading? What will you preface it, and what will you follow it with?
Well, if they've been with me a year, or if they've been with me before, I basically do 2 weeks of GPP work, which is my contralateral circuits and higher volume. And then, if you've done it before, I throw it in. And I'll be honest with you, I've taken a high school kid walking in, have done no training ever. They've admitted it in high school, just played hockey and other sports, and threw them under Supra-maximal load just to see. And that I like that lift because it's pretty safe with the safety bar. Right? And if we miss it, they only miss it by 3 or 4 inches because it falls on the pins. And I've only seen crazy results. Why? If this kid has just played sports his whole life, he still has a base of adaptability. What's the difference between him changing directions on a single leg, right, in hockey, where there's 400 or 500 pounds of force, maybe 7, and yet he's doing a safety split bar squat with 400 on his back? There's not much difference. You know what I mean? So I stress them. I've tried it, really controlled settings. The only thing I've seen is massive changes.
Now, with someone coming in off the street, essentially, like a high school kid, Charlie Francis said all novice or everyone's first block is essentially medium intensity because they're all out of fucking shape. So if everything's medium intensity anyway, why even bother stressing the system like that?
So when I say right out of the chute, I'll do a GPP block, which is actually probably light intensity but high volume. And then I've thrown them in, and because I only have 9 weeks to get them ready when they walk in, and I have to get them for safety, in my opinion, I have to get them as strong as they possibly can. And then what happens in my second year is I get the most out of my athletes the second year because right? They have a training age with me. Mm-hmm. I've never seen it in the first year. So I would like to say I have 18 weeks, but with freshmen that walk in the door, I have 9. And if guys, I have a freshman that can safety bar, split squat. I have a female that's done 400 pounds on the single leg safety bar split squat. I have a male walk in that can't do 250. Like we got to get him to 400 like in the next 4 weeks, and we can, and we do it. Right? I mean, I have 180-pound guys do 600, 355 on single leg split squats with the floating heel. Right? And a lot of people don't think, oh, my kids can't get there. Trust me, everyone that's tried that lift, your athletes get there really fast. And here's the benefits. That, like, I wanted to get Supra-maximal loading, and the hormonal responses I've seen through blood work and or other means that I test are crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And this is why we train. You don't want to look like a marathon runner. Why? Because they have the bad hormone mix from doing too much work, in my opinion. It's important that they do that. But you want to look like a sprinter where they got great hormones, right? Well, Supra-maximal loading causes great hormones. And I'm only talking 4 weeks a year. But that 4 weeks can benefit through the entire year because you've made some crazy changes.
So have you done a side-by-side with a standard with your population of submaximal loading in that same exact block versus Supra-maximal loading simultaneously hormonal response gauge, like with it proceeding the GPP phase?
Yes, I can't get that same. Like my males will wake up in the morning from Supra-maximal and be like, Coach, I I'm so freaking, wound tight in the morning when I wake up. Like, it's crazy. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, I mean, they have the male organ is relatively stiff at that point. You know what I'm saying? And they're dead right. Look, you can't match that level of intensity with that load, right? It's just hard. And when you do it, people understand it. And, but again, you can only get the benefit, like in my opinion, 2 to 3 week training blocks. Like once I get an athlete some level of proficiency, I have never seen a 3 or 4 week block make them better unless they're extremely deficient at something. I only get the results out of 2 weeks at, 2 to 3 at the most, and anything, then you need to switch the quality, in my opinion.
Regardless of training age.
No.
Okay.
My athletes at my level at college, once they're a certain level of proficiency.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So, and when I say that, like, incoming kid could probably work strength all summer and he'll be fine, right? And he'll get benefits. Yes, he's going to get stronger faster. I get it. But I got a kid that runs a 2.56 in a 20-yard dash who's a 22-year-old senior. I'm going, like, if I do power for 4 weeks, he gets slower. I've only seen it be efficient for 2. And if you like are working like muscle stim along with it, the same thing goes. Like I don't find much after 2 weeks. Like you'll get some benefits from muscle stim for certain like millivolts if you're trying to work power, millivolts for speed, blah blah blah, fast twire, right? But after 2 weeks, there's not much more benefits you can drain out of that. So you got to switch the stimulus training qualities up. And that's just what I've seen after 2 to 3 weeks is the most that I can get some quality out of. And you just keep testing somebody and making sure. Now, there's 2 ways to look at that, guys. With my training, like I do a high volume training. So you'll basically have to see that results come a couple weeks later. You know what I mean? Sometimes, because I use a high volume. If you use a lower volume approach where you train optimally every day, you'll only get results for 2 weeks.
And then, I mean, we're talking heavily about through this summer period, but then what about when they're going into a long season?
Yeah, I train more optimally then. I don't worry. I'm just trying to keep them like retaining the qualities that we developed over the summer.
And so due to the huge hormonal releases that they're getting and these massive strength gains and speed and power gains that they're getting, what's the minimal effective dose that they need? What's the residual that you're finding for the in season to keep this?
80 to 85% is mine.
Oh.
Yeah. And then I'll even do like, sometimes I'll throw in I can do a super maximal, like I call it a single or like a split deadlifts where rack pull. So I'll do an isometric for 5 seconds. Like I'll put the bar between their legs. I'll do a single leg deadlift, split squat deadlift, and they're pulling against the rack. And that's really 100% load. And it's a pretty safe way of implementing a maximal load. And I actually figured out with my throwers, because when we were doing a lot of speed work to peak my throwers, 1 year, like they were all hitting some PRs during this peaking time, but they came to me and like, Coach, we hit PRs, but we just didn't feel like we were strong as we should be. I'm like, okay, well, we hit lifetime PRs, but we'll figure it out. And it really came from, in my opinion, is like we were doing lightweight, so there wasn't a hormonal response. So I added literally 3 reps each leg of this 5-second iso rack pull, and they got that adrenaline release and a hormonal response, and then they would train the speed at light loads between 25 and 50%. And guess what happened? They said they felt better. Didn't mean they always threw farther, but like it was the same result. Like they felt better. And I think it was just the raw hormones, because in my opinion, the hormones don't get released as well unless you're under super intense heavy loads. I think there's some point where there's no return, but the super intense loads are obviously a key factor.
And so when you're, just to clarify, when you're talking about hormones, I mean, you're talking about blood panels,
yes,
before and after.
Yeah.
What you'd mentioned about peaking, And one of the other questions that we had come in was the ASFM peaking system that you've got there. So is this, you know, your final 2-week block before a competition phase? And could you go into the rhymes and reasons behind this technique?
Yeah, so I've really kind of built on it in the last 4 years, where let's say you take a band and you put it across the rack, right? And it's, let's say it's a big green band, a super thick one, and you bend over and you put your arm above your head and you slide it in between the band, you put a 1-pound weight in there, and you move that arm up and down as fast as you can, and the band is facilitating the movement. That's kind of my new AFSM. And when I say that, is the ASFM is basically, I'm pulling the muscle, like that arm down as fast as I can in the band, and then I relax it to pull it up, and the band helps me. But the biggest thing with the ASFM was the ability to shut your muscles off. And this is what we found with, gosh, it was Medvedev. Was it Medvedev? Was he the Russian? Yeah, he was a Russian that realized the world, it's in super training too, the chart. The biggest difference between gold medalists and like people that missed the Olympic team or just on the team that weren't great performers, it wasn't the speed of contraction, it was the ability to relax the muscle faster, which tells you there's a higher level of muscular coordination, obviously. But so then the question became, how do I train this? And really the ASFM came from Sheraton's law that if I cause the bent or the bicep to contract, obviously the tricep relaxes. Well, I need to be able to train that shutting off. And in our peaking manual that we have now from the ASFM, the big thing is that with those bands, and I have on my YouTube page, there's 450 of these exercises we got now that you turn the muscle on and off extremely fast. And I have a TMJ. Do you guys know what that is? It's just like they run a shock through the muscle. It's about $20-some thousand, and it analyzes how fast the muscle contracts and relaxes. Okay. So these exercises I've confirmed teach the muscle to turn on, but they teach it to relax from full contraction. So then what's the big deal about that? The damn muscle can refire again to keep applying force, right? So that level of coordination is key. Now, in regards to the duration of the peaking, 2 weeks is minimum. For example, I knew David Plummer, Olympic gold medalist, Olympic bronze medalist, and 2 Olympics ago. I knew his best results came 6 weeks of the peaking phase. So we went to the gold medal race, we worked back, and I started ASFM light load training between 25 and 50%, 6 weeks out. So what I'm saying is you have to kind of understand the athlete if you have that type of events and know how long. But I coached the kid for 10 years before not 10 years before we figured it out. We had to figure it out before that. But I had coached him 10 years, and we knew 6 weeks out we start. And that race was a Wednesday, so we started that on a Wednesday, 6 weeks before the Olympics.
And so when then you're using this technique, are you also still using your like residual amount of strength work in your 80 to 85% once a week as a dosage in there, or is it purely ASFM for X amount of sessions per week?
No, for me, it's usually ASFM, the light loads peaking zones 1 through 4. And the reason is when I test them, so here's the deal. If you're back squatting, you may get weaker at the back squat, but I have like the 1080 synchros where I can just actually check force and force plates. Mm-hmm. They don't get weak. They only get weak at the back squat because it's a motor skill.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? So if you did the leg sled, and I tried this on leg sled years ago, they were still strong in the leg sled. They got weak at the back squat because we weren't actually back squatting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
So people have to realize you may lose strength, but be aware that you're learning a motor skill, right? So that's why I actually don't bench press for max strength anymore. I use my 1080 synchro because I had 2 kids that benched the same. They benched like, just for simplicity, they benched 250 on the bar. The one kid produced 270 pounds of force on my synchro. The other kid was a bad bencher, but he produced 310 on the synchro, which is on a Smith machine measuring the force that they produce. So my point is, one kid's 40 pounds stronger actually, but they bench the same because one is a pissy bencher. He was a freshman that walked in the door. You see the difference, right? So like a bench press to me is not a great indicator of how strong my kids got.
The synchro moves, right? Or is it isometric?
Yeah, so it's like a Smith machine that's hooked to basically the device that will apply force. And basically, Mike, you said it at like 3 meters, 0.3 meters per second, and you do your bench, and it'll tell you produce 310 pounds of force. But you can't bench 310 because you can't stabilize a bar like that. You see what I mean?
Yes.
But it's a true accurate measure, in my opinion, of real strength, right? So I may put 60 pounds on a bad bencher's upper body strength, but it only shows us that he improved 20 on his bench press, right? Because the skill of the bench press. So as strength coaches, we gotta realize that we actually may be doing some good work. This kid just may be a bad bencher, and it'll take a little bit to get his bench pattern grouped in, right? But like, why do I have to worry about that if I can, I mean, it's good to bench correctly.
So with all this heavy lifting, here's how I kind of look at things. The isometric and the eccentric actually train. They're actually preparing the body, whereas the heavy lifts, it's a realization, right? This is a display of what your body's actually capable of doing. Now you only have 9 weeks, so you need to prep these guys real quick to get them to realize who the fuck they are and realize quickly as optimally as possible. In a long term, have you trained guys for 26 plus weeks, like 26, which, half a year, or 36 weeks?
Yeah. The 9 weeks of the freshman. The other guys are 18 to 20 usually.
Okay. Yeah. And how long are you training these guys maximally? And even, the 85%, how long does that 85%, the 85% stay that 85%, or are you retesting and then redistributing the 85%? So like, hey, their bench in the beginning of the block was 250, and we know they went up to 315 on the bench, but we're still basing it off the 85% off the 250, or are you basing it now off of the 315?
Yeah, I'll change the maxes as soon as I know that they need changed. Mike, I used to do a triphasic at the beginning, run through a power speed phase, and then recycle through triphasic. Mm-hmm. But now everyone has to do one triphasic in the off season, which is super maximal. And then I will not do another triphasic unless that 20-yard dash test tells me they need strength. And then here's the beauty of the 20. Mike, I threw in a 5-yard dash analysis too into that. And if your 5 is slow compared to your 20 and 10, what does that have to do with? That has to do with starting strength, which tells me isometric. Dead on. Are you ready? So I'm telling you, I found a way to hack triphasic. I'm telling you, and then, so I got the 5-yard dash. So you get a strength reading and your 5's good. I will put you through an eccentric phase. Now, I hacked the eccentric phase. How did I do that? I came up with a no-touch pro-agility formula that compares to the 10 and the 20. So if your pro-agility is fast enough, no hand touch pro-agility, because I took the hand out because there was too many variables.
Yeah.
It tells me if you need the eccentric phase. So if you get a 10-20 reading that's strength, but you get checked off by the isometric phase of the 5-yard dash, and you get checked off by the pro-agility, you don't do eccentric or iso yet. You will do a concentric max loads 80 to 85%. Does that make sense?
Total.
So I hacked triphasic. I'm telling you triphasic works, but now I know if you need it or not. And you have to do one a year just to make sure that your tissue and bone density is high. But after that, all bets are off.
Yeah. I'll always with almost all my clients mix in an eccentric block, isometric block almost all the time. Now where again we have combating thought processes is you are a big stimulate adapt guy, right? Like you said, hey, it's only good for 2-3 weeks. I am a very I slow cook everything. right? Because I believe there's two more, and I heard, again, this is a Dan Paff thing. I heard Paff say, well, yeah, we do stimulate, adapt, stimulate, adapt, stimulate, adapt, but there's no stabilization and there's no actualization. So let's say, yeah, you get the stimulation, the adaptation the first 2 weeks, but I want my guys to be able to stabilize. Yeah, maybe they don't get any stronger weeks 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, but I want them to stabilize that load and I want them to actualize it. So this is now routine. Now, again, I have the luxury of time. You got 9 fucking weeks. So I understand that.
Well, however, when I look at that, I go, okay, but why do I need them to stabilize that load in that lift? They don't do that lift in competition. Mm-hmm. So I needed to get them as strong as I possibly can, as fast as I possibly can. Now, if you're a young kid, even some of my older guys, if let's say I went from strength to power, so power is between 55 and 80% movement max effort, everything, they still get stronger, right? So it's not like we've completely left the strength. And my number one concern is that they run faster. So they lift heavy loads, but I don't care about that lift. It is zero importance to me. I want to make sure that they run faster. Now, in the off season, Mike, to address the adapt and stabilize, I feel that you have to cause super compensation. If I have like this end of COVID with my son, he's 15 and he was training, I would not cause much super compensation in him because I was training him every day exactly the amount. And I think this is much superior. But I feel in the off season, you have to use I prefer super maximal loading because you have now taken that organism to a whole nother level of adaptation. And then when you come back to what I would call non-super compensation, adaptation, taking them into that deep hole, you can get better results if there's a time frame in that year where you took them into that deep hole of major adaptation in the off season. And realistically, if you can spare 6 to 8 weeks of that in the off season, you're in season now, you can train at higher volumes in season to retain those qualities. So we're speaking the same thing. I just would say in the off season, I may take my athletes deeper and harder into a bad period. They may get slower, and they do. We have grafted. They'll get slower, but at the end of that 6 weeks, week 8, they will run the fastest time they've ever ran. And then I do more stabilized training, like you would say, where I'm not taking them too deep. Does that make sense? So we do the same thing. I just, in the beginning of the summer, I try to destroy them in a good way, at a good level. But yet it's still kicking their ass because, again, the adaptations for them to reach the highest levels, I feel that I have to take them into super maximal loading to get the adaptations down the road so they can handle a ton of stress.
This super maximal loading, I mean, we've mentioned about the hormones already, but you also mentioned bone density. I mean, how quick are the adaptation rates that you're talking about? I mean, are you really able to see in 2 weeks significant improvements in this in the structural tissue?
Well, the density comes as the bone adapts over the next 5 to 7 weeks, I think.
Okay. Right.
And then when we do DEXA scans at the end of the summer, because we'll do them pre and then we do them post. And then I got kids that are 2 standard deviations above the normal bone density for that type of sport. So you're going to talk about 10 to 12 weeks later, basically. Sure. From that, literally 4 weeks of super maximal loading. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
but
yeah,
again,
sure.
It's I do in power phases after that. So it's not like, it's not like it's just the super maximal loading. It's the whole spectrum of again, taking them deep into that super compensation phase. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, there's no doubt that it's just a piece of the larger puzzle. Because I mean, yeah, for sure.
And then to be clear, after that, I would train more like you're talking and Dan's talking about, where I don't take them that deep into that super compensation. And I agree with everything you said and everything Dan said. I'll just carve out 6 weeks a year where it becomes we call it the pain cave. It's cold, it's dark, it's wet, and it's fucking lonely, right? And we train in that super maximal area for those weeks. And then it's usually all done for the rest of the summer.
Yeah. It's a super anti-fragile approach, huh? I mean, you're taking them to places that they'd never go, just, and if you do it so cleverly, I mean, just to put it out there, have you had any bad injuries through this phase, like really stressing these guys hard, or is the exercise selection so good and the level of care around?
That's why, and really, remember, the super maximal loading is the split squat. So people talk about, well, I wanted to do it with like super maximal loadings with back squat, but I mean, I have throwers that Olympic squat 680. So I'm not going to have them back squat 8 something, right? But I found that if I did the safety bar split squat and I put 600, 800, 700 pounds on one leg, right? I'm going, this is safe. And I mean, I've done it, and people say, well, how long have you done it? Geez, we've probably done a few thousand athletes over the last decade with it.
Yeah.
And the back problems, people think, oh, maybe back, but that bar feels so good on your back because of the padding and everything. It's never been an issue. Yeah. No, that's the one lift I do it with. Now there's other lifts you could, but I'll be honest with you, the safety bar split squat, it's the most, in my opinion, and guys, you have to realize when I'm doing it, I'm going my knees in front of my toes, heels are off the ground. And if you take a side snapshot, that's the exact position they are when they're accelerating. That's the exact position they are when they're jumping. Mm. And people say, well, I'm not parallel. Well, I've never seen my athletes parallel, right? They're at 90 degrees, but it looks like, I would say the angle probably sometimes less than a 45, but they're at 90 degrees or more than 90 on their knee joint. But that's exactly the position they are in sports. So again, in my opinion, the back squat, when you do heavy back squat, at elite level sprinters, if they go nice and deep, man, I've only seen it make my kids slower. And that's why we went to the SS Sport back squat 20 some years ago.
Now, do you notice a lot of pelvic dysfunction occurring when you're doing the heavy split? I mean, right there, it's held together by essentially 3 joints, right? It's held together by the pubic symphysis and the SIJ on the one side, the SIJ on the other side. And that's, so there's a lot of fucking shearing going on.
There was, and you know what happened? That's the reason I went to the split squat on the floor. I tried to do the real elevated, and the chiro the next day, my first Monday, I'm like, all right, we got through this. Chiro comes Tuesdays, like everybody's like fucked up. Yep. I went, oh shit, that's me, right? And there was no pain yet, right? But he's like, Cal, they're all off. I don't know why. I said, well, let me see what I can do next Monday. And then we put the foot on so I'm not saying the rear, see, people think I'm saying the rear foot's bad. No, it's not bad. At super maximal loading, it's bad, right? Put your foot on the ground. Less than super maximal loading, I think the rear foot squat elevated is fine, right? It's okay. Don't do it with super maximal loading because you're right, it causes that shearing effect.
Yep.
Cal, have you tried doing super maximal on the quantum synchro and then, getting the weight to release at the bottom so that then they could start hit? Yeah, because that's the beauty of that machine. Yeah,
I use weight releases in the weight room when I don't have as many Quantros as I need 6 of them. So it'd be like, 300 grand. I use the weight releasers to do that too, to be a little safe, right? So they'll have that load on there, they'll get down close, and when they come out, they'll reverse it. Yeah, so the weight releasers fall off. So, and when I do the super maximal loading for 7 or 10 seconds, it's usually clusters. So what the way we do it is we'll have the first athlete gets in, does his left leg. We do it, and then he comes out, the other athlete does his left leg, then the first one will go back into his right leg, and then the next one will go into his right, and then we'll do probably 2 of those. So he'll do your left, right, and then you're done. But your partner's going in between there to give you a little rest from the super maximal loading.
Yeah.
So one thing I noticed, I had done triphasic training. The second I read the book and finished it, I started implementing it. Honest to God, I was over at DeFranco's at the time. I was one of his fucking trainers. I started fucking implementing it instead of doing a lot of max effort work. And where I ran into a lot of problems, I trained Chris Hogan at the time. As before he was anything. He just kept getting cut by everyone. We were doing the isometric split squat in a weak position, which was a deeper position, for I think 10 seconds, might have been 6 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever the fuck it was. But he started getting groin issues, and I didn't know what the fuck it was from. I was like, well, it can't be from these isometric split squats. Absolutely not. Must be from our speed work. I don't know what the fuck it is. And then finally, after about, I don't know, a month of me being an idiot, I finally took them out, and then the groin pain went away. And that's where it dawned on me, like, oh, fuck, this rear foot elevated shit. Yeah. It's a lot of shearing on these guys. So I have cut out rear foot elevated isometrics, cut them out entirely. After that, I barely do them. And now I'm very, very strict as to the type of form that my guys have when they're doing any kind of split squat, to make sure that that angle is not obtuse. That angle is either acute or it's 90 degrees. And go on.
My foot, I don't push my athletes because I find some of them, actually, here's what I found, Mike, that back foot is obviously a stability, and that's why I like them to hold on. But if their feet are bad on the loaded foot, they'll shorten that stride a little bit, just naturally, right? Yes. And again, that's the brain, as we talked about, a safety mechanism. And then when you watch those kids run, they will short stride that side too. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And like some other crazy shit I've seen is, like, here's how the brain wires itself to protect. I've had athletes running like at me, and I caught them upon foot strike. They internally rotate their leg a lot, more than they should, more than the other side. And I was like, so I get them on the table, and I'm trying to figure it out. And everybody thinks weaknesses, right? Glute med. I check the glute med. It's fucking strong. Well, then I dig around the adductor magnus, and guess what I found? I got a fucking problem. So I worked on adductor magnus, and now the foot didn't internally rotate upon striking as much. So here's what it boiled down to, is I've realized that internal rotation wasn't a weakness. It's a fucking safety mechanism, so that you didn't tear your groin apart when you're running at full speed. You see what I mean?
Yes.
So that's the problem. Like, I think we're wired as coaches to think about weaknesses when we need to think survival fucking mechanism on this stuff. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And now again, so people don't also think that every time someone's internally rotated, it's because they're compensating because that's tight. I've also seen internal rotation be a compensator because the abductors fucking suck.
Oh yeah. Oh,
right.
No question.
Yeah. Right. And it's because that adductor is also a hip extensor. And that's what I learned with fucking Hogan. That adductor started acting as a hip extensor, and that's when he felt it. And we thought it was his hamstring the whole fucking time.
Yes. No, exactly. And now, because the adductor magnus is a hip stabilizer, hip extensor too, right? Mm-hmm. So then how you check it, like, you just have them lay on the bench and internally rotate their foot, lay on the ground, and then have them hold that leg on the ground while you pick it up.
Yeah.
And if that thing's weak, that's when you need to do your glute hams with your toes internally rotated, your reverse hypers, toes internally rotated. So that's the series of shit I'm putting together for all these exercises. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Total.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see that in the hockey guys all the time, because they're using their groins far too much in everything that they're doing for any type of hip extension.
Now, hey, guys, I'm going to tell you, RPR has an archery set that it's basically the medial top of the calf right over the head of the tibia. It's about a 1 to 2 inch area that you get it right below the knee, right at the top of the calf, and you hit that, and I've seen it reset the arch. Now, it wasn't until last year I put it all together. I was at USA Hockey Camp, and we had 6 girls with groin problems on day 3, right? And there's 100 girls there. So
do you mean the tibialis posterior area?
Yeah.
So literally, right in here.
A little higher, yep.
Okay.
And then go all the way back to the medial part of the calf. Yep, right there. That little inch area. Dig in that, right?
Yeah.
Wait, not you so much because your feet aren't bad. Mm-hmm. But I'm telling you, I was at USA Hockey, and I put it together last August. and I had girls, and then I checked their lateral sling and it was off. And I found that many of the lateral sling problems are actually an arch problem. So I felt the arch reset, and it was really bad on these 6 girls they brought to me with groins. So I hit that arch reset. They went out and skated. Guess what? The groin problem went away, only because if you think about it, like if you have pants on and you pull your pants down by your, like right by your foot, it stretches all the way up to the groin. Like it moves, like your groin and that whole sling's connected. It's right there. You got to, yeah, you're showing me on your phone.
So right there, that's the spleen sinew channel.
Yes.
And what you were talking about was a point called spleen 9.
Right? There it is. And you hit spleen 9, your foot is, so literally guys, I will have people on my table that have no lateral sling, no stability in their hips. I hit the RPR hip spot. They instantly on the table check positive. They can hit it themselves. They get up, they run around, and if they get back on the table and I check it and it's off, they don't have a hip problem. They have an arch problem. I have them hit the arch spot, which you call what did you just call it?
That's spleen 9. It could be a couple of things, but
yeah,
essentially it's like origin of, I think it might be origin of tibialis posterior.
Sure, exactly. You hit that, and then they run and come back, and they're rock solid. And that has been a game changer. That one is a game changer because, again, I hit that area, and it was every one of those girls' problems was their groin. It was actually that arch collapsing every time they stride, which puts more tension on the abductor magnus for stabilization.
Now, when I notice that arch collapse on that side, it does indicate a glute medius issue on that ipsilateral side, right? So maybe, yeah, you're attacking that spleen line. You're hitting that medial side, and anywhere on the channel is going to impact positively somewhere else on the channel, and that fascial sling might have something to do with it. But there's every time we're feeling pain, there's a cause and effect relationship. That's the effect. That's not the cause. So typically what I notice, and obviously not every fucking time, but typically what I notice, if I literally hit the exact opposite side, if I go right along the opposite sling, that's actually the gallbladder channel. But if I go on that and hit that glute medius or that piriformis and maybe even the IT band, that'll also chill some pain out as well.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that?
Yes, it's all neurological when we say this, right? Like, I'll give you one example. I had a kid, so he'd been in our system at the end of the year, right before COVID hit. His feet were super strong. I worked on him myself in regards to just pushing on him and making sure, oh my guys, Mike, he took a butt end of a stick into his midsection area, like hip pointer, not a hip pointer, but inside, just inside. And I checked his foot strength and it disappeared.
Yeah.
And I'm going, so this isn't just a one-way street, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, good God, he got a hip pointer and his super strong feet just disappeared on me.
Yeah.
I went, what the hell? Like, it's hard to, and I should have known this, right? I just get frustrated because there's things that are just right in my face that I never know. You know what I mean? It's just frustrating because I don't know, but I'm just sitting here going, how did I miss that? So this goes, I always thought it went ground up, but in a feedback loop, but this can change everything. A little bit of pain. And Mike, then there's pain that we don't even know we have because you haven't sensed it yet, but your body knows it's there, right?
100%. 100%. And if you have grip issues, it could be related to the rotator cuff. Guys with shitty grips, it's the same exact concept. It could go from outwards work in and inwards work out. It's that feedback loop starting from fetal development. It starts with the spinal cord, the cranium, and the sacrum, and it's all connected from there. And it'll send all the systems. It'll send all the messages up and down the system from there.
Right. And here's the thing. I'm not going to say we have it wrong, but what we know right now, it can't all be correct because it can't explain everything, right?
100%, yeah.
And I just hope smart friggin' people can boil it down for me to make it like fairly simple at some point, but it's not. It's so complex, right? It's frustrating. Oh, jeez.
Well, listen, Cal, bro, thank you. I think we've been on this for over 2 hours now. We've taken up enough of your time. We appreciate you so fucking much, bro. Brooker, do you have any final questions?
No, man, that was awesome. We need to do a part 2 soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully somebody listened after the first 10 minutes, but we'll figure it out.
Bro, I'll tell you what, you're going to get, I have a feeling this is going to be a pretty big fucking podcast. This
was great.
There was so much fucking information on this. And if there's anything you want me to like edit out, because we started talking about a lot of stuff that you sell, let me know and I'll edit it out.
Yeah, no, I don't care. Whatever.
Right on, dude. Are there any shout outs that you want to do? Any websites, anything that you want us to put in the show notes? Anything you want anyone to go to find you?
Yeah. I mean, it seems like half the free world finds my email, so it's Cal Dietz at Gmail. You know? And maybe on this podcast, I usually do something like, if you listen to this, just put free whiskey in the title. I'll usually get to it. And, right? It's kind of that like little nice surprise. I'm like, oh, I can get some free whiskey here. And then, if I don't answer it, hit me up in another week or so. Cause I get a lot of emails a day. So, and then I got Exoathlete as my website. Reflexiveperformance.com is RPR. And then, Instagram is Cal Dietz. So should be able to find me. If you can't, you're probably a little insufficient in, some form of communications. So.
Right on. Cal, you're the man. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you and your time and everything that you're giving out. We really do. You're a fucking pioneer. You're top of the food chain, man. Like, we need more guys like you.
Thanks, guys. It was awesome.
Cheers, buddy.